is such an important topic. I'm Becky Royer, and I'm subcontracted with the State Office of Rural Health to assist with the Medicare Beneficiary Quality Improvement Project and work with critical access hospitals on a number of different quality improvement topics. I'm joined today by Allie Orwig, who with the Indiana Rural Health Association, that is helping support Zoom. So today we do want you to be interactive. I know in our last session we had a lot of activity on chat. So if you hover at the bottom of your screen or the top, depending on your computer, there should be a bar pop up, and if you click on the chat button, that will open that up for you. As well as we'd like for you to use your camera if at all possible so that we can see one another. It's a smaller group of hospitals that is participating in the initiative, so we can really have some good interaction and discussion. I'd also like to introduce Joyce Fillingworth. Joyce, if you'd like to introduce yourself and unmute and say hello to everyone.
Sure, yes. For those of you who aren't able to perhaps join the first session, my name is Joyce Vonworth. I'm the State Office of Rural Health Manager. So there's currently 3 different grants I always see that support the smaller rural hospitals. So happy you were able to join, and hopefully you're at home and not in this weather. But again, thank you for taking the time out. I know during your busy schedule, especially if you're involved with the vaccine distribution on top of everything else. I appreciate your commitment to this project. Thank you.
Thanks, Joyce. David Conrad is also the Flex Coordinator at the State Office of Rural Health, and he is working the call center today and trying to get all the vaccines and everything back on schedule and answer questions. So we thank David for his dedication and helping out there at the call center. Also, Lori Gert with the Indiana Hospital Association is a part of our partner team, and she is unable to join today. And then kind of my cohort in crime is Elizabeth Burrows. And Elizabeth, if you want to unmute and introduce yourself.
So I know many of you, but yes, my name's Elizabeth Burrows. I've worked at the State Department of Health and also ran rural health clinics and federally qualified health centers. I've had a chance to meet some through the program and also through various other methods, but we are really excited. Becky and I are really excited to, even though today is going to be great, I'm really excited about the action planning that we're going to be doing on site with each of you and your teams. And I really encourage you to engage as many people as possible. You'll get the videos, you can share them. I know people are really busy, but maybe, play them in your car or while you're working on something else to really learn. I will tell you, when I first heard about this project, I would say my interest level was about a 3 out of 10, and now I'm at a 25 out of 10. I mean, I am just so excited seeing what all is happening. I mean, I thought we needed it, but now I am just super engaged. Really excited to have all of you on board. I've even learned I got a cousin on board, so I'm excited to connect with Jane because we're long lost cousins, we've learned, and just some other things like that. So we're excited to have all of you. Please use the chat. If you have our cell phone numbers, or you can feel free to text us if something's going wrong, or if you are having any technical difficulties. We'll get Allie to fix. I know with this week we've been having different difficulties with some webinars. Feel free to email us, text us, and use the chat because we want everybody engaged. And again, it's what you're going to make it, but it's really going to go. Last time it went fast, and I think with this topic, it's going to go even faster.
I agree. Thanks, Elizabeth. Well, we are really very today to have 2 presenters that are subject matter experts in this area to help guide us in our discussion today. Christina Wicks is the lead and Region 9 Coalition Coordinator for the Indiana Trafficking Victims Assistance Program, which is a mouthful, with the Indiana Youth Services Association. She is really very passionate about the human trafficking topic and really helping with prevention, identification, and excellent resource for us here in Indiana. Her complete bio is within the presentation. And also Deanna Paddack. Deanna works for the Indiana Department of Health. She's an infection prevention consultant. Deanna also owns and operates 4P Consulting Company, and she provides education in a lot of different areas, but she's particularly passionate about substance use disorder and human trafficking from a very personal perspective. And she has been a registered nurse for a number of years, but also worked in the emergency department and really has some good insights on what it's like to both be a clinician and to be the family member of a loved one that's going through some of these issues. So her stories today, I think, will really drive home the importance of all of this work. Likewise, her presentation is contains her complete bio, and so I encourage you to read through that as well. All of the presentations and handouts were sent out yesterday afternoon around 1:50, and then later last night, probably around 8 o'clock. Lots of good resources in those handouts. Both of our presenters' presentations were included. So at this time, I'm going to turn it over to Deanna, and we will begin our program for today. And again, definitely chat in, feel free to unmute. Just click in the participant list. If you will click the little red microphone icon, or if you hit *6, that will allow you to unmute, and then you'll hit that again to mute. But Allie will be available to help anyone who's having difficulties. So feel free to interrupt us at any time. So Deanna, take it away.
Becky, thank you. Thank you to Becky, Elizabeth, Joyce, and all of the partners that partner together with us to present all of this information, both on substance use disorder and human trafficking. And thank you all for being here this morning. I'm very grateful to all of you. I know you guys are so busy, you're so swamped, and you're working so hard. I feel for you. I know what it's like to be in the ER and how busy and challenging that is. And I just really appreciate the fact that you took some time out of your day to kind of sit and listen, hear, become educated, become more aware of kind of what's going on. I hope that this will be a great presentation for you. You'll get some really good takeaways out of it. I think it'll probably open your eyes to some things that you probably weren't aware that were occurring or that are currently occurring. And with that, I hope to give you some additional resources on, okay, great, now I know it's occurring, now what do I do? So with that, we're kind of gonna get started. I could talk on this topic, honestly, probably for 2 solid days straight. So I'll have to keep on track and on time. Becky, you'll help me out there, I'm sure. But once again, thank you all so much for being here, and I will begin with this presentation. Okay, perfect. We are just going to briefly start here and talk about the etymology of human trafficking. Where did that term come from? What does that term mean? And what do we do with that once we've defined that? So human trafficking, the actual etymology of that word is the use of force, coercion, and or fraud to obtain commercial sex acts, labor, or insurance payments. It is a form of modern day slavery. It's exploitation. And the Merriam-Webster dictionary actually defines human trafficking. It's utilized as a noun. Remembering noun, person, place, or thing. It's organized criminal activity in which human beings are treated as possessions to be controlled and exploited. So I think it's often oftentimes important to discuss not only what is human trafficking, because when we say human trafficking as a whole, I think there's a lot of things that get lumped into human trafficking. So I really want to define human trafficking versus human smuggling. Human smuggling is the illegal movement of someone across a border or state jurisdiction. It's moving humans as part of cargo transport in vehicles, boats, tractor trailers, boxcars, trains, automobiles, commercial buses, and flights. Smuggling operations receive billions of dollars a year for their participation in transportation. They have no real concern for humanity. Humans aren't viewed from a human perspective. They're viewed as cargo. They're viewed as merchandise, just as, we ship cargo all across the country. That's what these individuals are kind of viewed as. There's no coercion involved typically when it comes to human smuggling, and this is from an adult perspective. Christina can probably speak a lot better on this than what I can. This is kind of her expertise. But typically when you're talking about human smuggling, you're talking about adults. In general, it may be families, and they're wanting to move from one location to another. There's not kind of this coercion, although I think that there are some tactics that are used in that smuggling. It's typically facilitated willingly between individuals and smugglers, and the view of human smuggling is that the smuggled person then becomes viewed as a criminal. And this slide may be a little difficult for you guys to see. It is in the handout. It is part of the Polaris project. Sorry, I have a tickle in my throat here. And the Polaris project, really talking about the sex trafficking versus labor trafficking. Where is the power and control utilized at? What did they use? It's coercion and threats, intimidation, emotional abuse, oftentimes isolation, denying blame and minimizing. There can be sexual abuse. Oftentimes there is sexual abuse along with physical abuse, economic abuse, and using privileges. Kind of as you can see that all of these things get put into the center of this wheel. And the traffickers, or the people who are trafficking individuals, they're utilizing all of this power and control. And so it's kind of this wheel that just keeps spinning in this circle that is difficult for individuals to get out of. And with that, I'm going to kind of stop sharing my screen. This is an opportunity, or this is really where Christina can kind of come in and give greater expertise. As Becky introduced her before, I had the opportunity of connecting with Christina and her organization through the Indiana Youth Services Association. And after our talks, really am so grateful to her organization, and to her team to kind of hop on board, help us out here, really explain human trafficking, and have this presentation that's really geared towards you guys, the healthcare providers, in identifying and what that looks like. I'm going to stop sharing my screen now so that Christina can share hers. Take it away.
Okay, thank you very much. All right, so you want me to jump full force into the PowerPoint? Okay. All right. So like Deanna said, thank you very much for introducing me. And if you guys do have any questions, please don't hesitate to ask them, unmute yourself, or even do the chat. I'd be happy to answer anything, and it doesn't bother me at all. But like it was said, my name is Christina Wicks. I'm the Reach 9 Coalition Coordinator. I am one of 10 coordinators. We do cover the entire state of Indiana. I am from Southwest Indiana, so I am in Evansville, and I have the surrounding 8 counties outside of Vanderburgh County as well that we took over. But like I said, and I'll kind of explain a little bit more about our actual agency and what we do a little bit closer to the end. I do work for Indiana Youth Services Association, so a lot of our presentation does kind of reflect back to like youth and anyone who's age 24 and younger. But please keep in mind that all these ideals and concepts are kind of across the board, that you will come in contact with someone who might be a victim of human trafficking. So like the red flags and different things can all be very relevant, along with the vulnerabilities of someone that could be potentially at risk for human trafficking as well. So we were created back in 1973 because unfortunately Indiana had the second highest youth delinquency rate. And that of course was something we did not want to be known for. So we really focus on our 4 core values with youth advocacy, that delinquency prevention, information referrals, and of course that community education, which is where the Indiana Trafficking Victims Assistance Program kind of comes into, because we focus a lot on that community education around human trafficking and the effects of it. And so I do a lot of presentations with general public, community, doing like Human Trafficking 101 and that information. And we focus, of course, on law enforcement, healthcare providers, educators, and social workers and service partner providers. Because as we do more presentations, we're starting to see more victims being identified. So we definitely have to let people know how to report it, what to do when you recognize it, and what to do with them after we do recognize human trafficking. So we will kind of, Deanna used a very good definition of human trafficking. So we'll definitely kind of focus on that a little bit more also, along with the AMP model, which kind of shows you the elements of human trafficking. And then of course, vulnerable populations, those red flags, and then of course, how that can be support to your agency. So I do show some videos. Oh, that played really fast. This one is just simply titled Faces of Human Trafficking. Just kind of pay attention a little bit to kind of who you see, maybe some of the things they say in this video. It's a very short clip, just to kind of see if anything kind of strikes you, or maybe you wouldn't typically think of when you think about human trafficking.
My trafficker was my husband. There was no way I could reach out to anybody for help.
We're scared. We're scared to run. We're scared to tell anybody what's going on.
It was an incredibly violent situation. I felt like there was no way I could get out.
Human traffickers can be just about anyone from any walk of life. A lot of the trafficking involves domestic servitude, hoteliers, restaurant owners, owners of massage parlors, agricultural farm owners.
It can be a trafficker who tells a woman, I want to be your boyfriend, I love you, and if you love me, you're going to go out and have sex for money. It can be kind of psychological like that, or it can be more overt, more physical. It can be hitting, abusing, keeping them away from any support systems.
Trafficking doesn't know any boundaries. The victim can be male, female, transgendered, anyone. And it happens all over America.
I still see this attitude of it's just immigrants or it's just people in other countries. It happens to US citizens so much more than people are aware.
So we kind of look at that video. Is there anything that kind of strikes you who you wouldn't think would be a typical victim of human trafficking? If anyone can answer.
Men.
Okay, men. And I do get kind of, that is usually a typical response, because I think a lot of times we think about the faces of trafficking, we really focus on youth and especially like women and young women and different things as far as that goes. But unfortunately, some of the studies I have read, boys actually constitute males for about almost 40% of human trafficking victims. It's usually about anywhere between 36 to 40% is what I've seen. Anything else that they kind of said?
I mean, it's in all different spectrums of work and life and geographical area.
Mm-hmm. Oh,
and
absolutely.
ages.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah. I really like, especially you say in geographical areas, because when we typically do think about what is human trafficking, I think a lot of people typically think that definition kind of is someone who's maybe more foreign or an immigrant born type situation, where someone's possibly also kidnapped and then they're smuggled into another country and then forced into sex slavery. But statistics and different things that we're seeing tell us that's not really the case. And just like you said, it could be anybody, any geographical location, men or women, anyone of different age ranges, any ethnicity, all of that can be victims of human trafficking. And then they said also during this video, people will be really surprised how much happens here in the United States of America. So a lot of our trafficking are actually US citizens in the United States. Some studies there again have shown that it's been up to about 80% of all trafficking victims in the US are US citizens. So definitely keep that in mind. It's not so much really the stranger type situation, nor is it someone being kidnapped and also different things. A lot of times traffickers do know their victims, and there is a lot of also intimate partner violence, generational cycle of violence, and different things that go along with that. And I'll kind of get into more of that as well. So when we talk about what is human trafficking, we use the definition that it's the use of force, threat of force, fraud, or coercion to compel a person to any form of work or service against their will. So of course, it's something that they're being forced into doing, and a lot of times it has that manipulation, convincing them, and that coercion really behind it. But there are some different things, of course, where they use force, threat of force, and fraud as well. Just to kind of break it down a little bit more, we have this called the AMP model. So it's your action, your means, and your purpose. So your action is the person that commits the crime, and any one of these people can be charged with trafficking. So you have recruiters, and unfortunately, anybody can be a recruiter of human trafficking. We have seen other youth go into other youth serving organizations to do active recruiting there. Because most of the time, some of those youth serving agencies tend to have a lot more vulnerable youth going there. So that's why they go after those places. And then one of the other things we see too, unfortunately, substance abuse is a really high, homelessness, substance abuse, and youth are some of the ones we really focus on. But people will go into active treatment centers, substance abuse treatment centers and facilities because they know they're vulnerable. They will do active recruiting there because of that. So those are some things we see as well. And then, of course, people who harbor victims, transports them. The people who are providing them, that's usually who we refer to as the buyer or the trafficker or the pimp. And then, of course, the ones who are obtaining, patronizing, or soliciting are usually your buyers or your Johns of human trafficking. So kind of keep all that in mind. All those people can, of course, like I said, be charged with trafficking. And then there you have the means. Force, fraud, and coercion is a lot behind how they're definitely trying to do it to get to their purpose for labor or services, and also for commercial sexual exploitation. So with labor or services, of course, labor usually refers to like things that happen in the workplace, whether it's unfair working conditions, crosses into the line where it's that labor trafficking issue, not just a labor violation, working really long hours, maybe not being compensated or paid. The work environment itself is not what they agreed it was going to be, where they maybe lied or got a lot of false promises and stuff to that person. But we also see a lot of issues with domestic servitude, where we are seeing youth possibly being pulled into domestic servitude situations, or there's also some adult-like situations as well. So the two examples I can give you is in Evansville, we have two pretty big colleges. We have the University of Evansville and we have the University of Southern Indiana. And so being a college town, there's a lot of times we will walk around campus and you'll see this handwritten sign that just says earn cash quick, being an in-home nanny or in-home housekeeper. To a poor broke college student, that sounds like a great, wonderful opportunity. So they call them up, they go check out the thing. And then of course, once they agree to be like an in-home nanny, it's not what they originally agreed to. Maybe they're not allowed to freely come and go as they thought they were going to be able to, or they may not be getting paid what they originally thought they were going to get paid as well. So those are some of the things that goes into that, where it crosses labor into a labor trafficking situation. And then we have had cases as well. Unfortunately, we've had young immigrant youth coming over here. They were with a single parent, they were with their father only. And they were preyed upon by a teacher at their school who said, hey, if you come live with me, I know your dad's gone a lot working in different things and stuff, which they were trying to reestablish themselves here. I will help give you extra tutoring if you're willing to help me with my kids. You know, trying to, you know, stay up with their studies, learn more English and different things. To them, that sounded like a great opportunity. But then again, it was, they never did any tutoring with them. They had to clean their house for really long hours. They had to help take care of all the kids and do everything as far as that goes. And then whenever it came time for meals, they would have to serve the family as they were seating. And then of course they had to stand there and eat their plate while everyone else kind of sat and enjoyed their time. So there again, that goes into, like I said, that domestic servitude. And then, of course, with commercial sexual exploitation and commercial sexual conduct, I always like to point out, too, that's more than just like sexual intercourse or any other type of sex act. Kind of keep in mind that can include pornography, can also include being forced to work at the local strip club. So there's lots of different things and stuff that go along with that. Just to break down these elements, force, of course, is exactly what you think it is. It is types of physical force. Beating, slapping, a lot of sexual assault, rape and gang rape situations. There can also be different burning and torture practices, because there again, the perpetrator wants to keep control over their victims. So torturing them with maybe the tip of a cigarette while they're burning them and different things, but it's just a form of like torturing them, keeping them in control, might be punishing them for something they did. And then there's also initiation, and this one's really tricky, because usually when it comes to human trafficking, there's always kind of like this promise of a better life, that there's this opportunity that they're going to be able to do something a lot more better and than the situation they're living in. It's going to be so much greater. And so even though it's forced and it could be physically painful or different things, a lot of times victims might go along with the initiation just because they want to feel like they're a part of something bigger. So that can be a part of that process as well. Then you have fraud. A lot of times we do see fraud when it comes to labor trafficking situations. Just depending on what's going on, a lot of times they prey upon a person for a desperation they're going through. And then they give them and explain to them what their opportunity might be, but it's a lot of false promises. They lie about the work conditions, a lot of deceitfulness, and different things. We actually had a situation where one of my colleagues worked with this woman who was from Thailand. And she was the oldest daughter and her oldest child in her family. So being the oldest, it was part of her responsibility to help out to make sure the family was taken care of, kind of be that other breadwinner of the family. So they found out their mother had cancer. So she knew she had to go outside the home and do more work to help take care of her. And there was a guy in the village. He was known to be the guy that would help fill out all your immigrant paperwork to give to the US to work. So she went to him for a fee of $10,000. He agreed to help her fill out all her information and paperwork. He said, what we can do is once you get to Indiana, you can go to work at my sister's restaurant. While you're there, you can eat and drink anything you want. We'll put you in an apartment. We'll take you back and forth to work. Everything will work out just fine. Sound like a great, wonderful opportunity. So as soon as she gets here to the US, to Indiana, the very first thing the sister does when she gets her at the airport is she asks her for her documentation. Let me keep it for safekeeping, your visa, your passport, your ID. Not knowing better, she gave it to her. So they set her up in the apartment. They drove her back and forth to work every day. She worked 6 days a week. On Sundays, the restaurant was closed. And on that day, everyone in the apartment would be taken over to the owner's house to clean her house on Sundays. And she did this for about a year, felt really good about herself that she was like doing a lot of good, sent most of her money back home to her family. But she finally got the courage to go ask her boss how much of her debt she had worked off. And that's when her boss looked at her, well, told her that your debt is now $25,000. Because what they didn't share with her in the whole lying about everything and those false promises is they didn't tell her that they were going to charge her rent for the apartment. They were going to charge her a pretty large fee to drive her back and forth to work every day. And they charged her for everything she ate when she was there at the restaurant. So now she's kind of stuck in the situation because she knows her family now owes a debt to this other family that she's never going to be able to get out of. So unfortunately, she did work in that situation for about a year, about 10 years before she was able to actually break away and get totally away from it. So we do see that happen quite a bit. Then when it comes to coercion, so we see this a lot in intimate partner violence, and the more that the victims know their perpetrator, we're going to see a lot more of this. So you do have threats of a lot of serious harm and different things. And like I said, depending on how well they know the perpetrators and their victims, what all they can threaten them with. Then there's a lot of intimidation, humiliation, that emotional abuse. They control their daily life, what they can and can't do, who they can and can't go hang out with, different things as far as that goes. And then they establish quotas. And this is where it's kind of tricky, because a lot of perpetrators would tell their victims, you have to go out and you have to earn so much money, or you can't come home tonight, or you're just not going to have a place to stay. And so even though they're a victim of sex trafficking and they go out and they have sex with people for money, they may not make that quota that day. So unfortunately, a lot of trafficking victims will turn to other crimes, possibly theft or different things, to try to make sure they're meeting that quotas so they don't get beat or hurt or don't lose a place to stay. And so we are seeing a lot of trafficking victims that also have issues of different criminal histories as they're getting out of the life. So kind of keep that in mind. Other things are going on with them as well. And then there's always like a climate of fear that the perpetrators like to instill into their victims. And Aubrey, I think, will tell you about this a little more when you see some of her story. But they just talk about how the traffickers, if you do one thing one day, it's okay. But the next time you do it, it's totally different. It's totally wrong. And they can't do what they're doing. And they can get beat for it. So they just never know what's right or what's wrong. And the victims are constantly feeling like they're walking on eggshells because they never know what they can and can't do. And this is just a little more as well, talking about some of the definitions of human trafficking. And these are the federal definition guidelines. When it comes to sex trafficking, of course, it includes recruiting, harboring, transporting, provision, obtaining, patronizing, or soliciting for any type of commercial sex act. And if the person is under the age of 18, they are a victim of sex trafficking. Indiana, we are what we call a safe harbor state. So we do not recognize juvenile prostitution. So if you're under the age of 18 and you receive any type of compensation for sex, whether it's money and or any other type of good, they are a victim of human trafficking, period. Like I said, we do not recognize juvenile prostitution. And then with labor trafficking, of course, recruiting, harboring, transporting, provision, or obtaining for any type of labor or services. But it usually involves some type of servitude, peonage, or debt bondage. So it's usually something they can hold over the victim's head to make them feel like they have to do what they are being forced to do because they owe something to their trafficker. Excuse me. So with Indiana law, just really briefly, so you are aware of them, there are 5 separate offenses when it comes to human trafficking. We do have adult human trafficking, sex trafficking, adult labor trafficking, then there's child sex trafficking. And we used to unfortunately have one law that covered labor and sex trafficking, but they finally did decide to pull them apart in 2018, which has been very beneficial. And then they've added a lot of different language and different types of situations to this as well to make a lot more stiffer penalties, make them applicable to buyers because the way the law used to be written, we could not charge buyers for human trafficking. And then they've added a lot of components to the human trafficking for child sex trafficking. So any minor is considered to be child abuse if they're being forced into human trafficking in the state of Indiana, which is really good because then it allows that child to automatically become a child in need of services. It's a CHINS case and situation. So they will right away start getting that youth services and help to recover from being trafficked. Also, it allows DCS to be able to, if that child is being trafficked by their parents, they can immediately terminate parental rights if they are trafficked there again by a parent under that CHINS designation as well. And this is very important as well. Any individual under the age of 18, if they are a victim of sex trafficking, they are a victim of human trafficking. They are not an underage prostitute. There's no such thing. Threat of force, fraud, or coercion does not have to be proven if they are a minor sex trafficking victim. Now, if they're over the age of 18 or any form of labor trafficking, we do have to prove those elements. But if they under 18 sex trafficking, we do not have to prove those elements, which is highly, highly important because a lot of times if you're working with a youth, they may not self-identify as a victim of human trafficking. So that's highly, and also depending on what their connection and relationship is to their perpetrator and trafficker, they may not want to cooperate or go along with law enforcement or helping officials. So that's why that's highly important that we do not have to prove those elements. And then of course, buyers of human trafficking, they cannot use it as part of the defense, trying to say, well, it was the minor's fault or they consented. They cannot blame the victim because a minor sex trafficking is a minor sex trafficking. They don't realize what they're consenting to or going along with. So that's important as well. And then of course, like I said, buyers can be charged with trafficking. And then just the last slide about the Indiana law. So this is just more language they've added to talking about the force, threat of force, fraud, or coercion. So the one in the middle is really important where it says knowingly destroying, concealing, removing, confiscating, or possessing any actual or purported passport or immigrant document. So kind of like the story I shared about the lady from Thailand. So they took her passport, immigrant, and paperwork away from her. So a lot of traffickers will hold that over their victim's head. Well, if you don't do what I tell you to do, or you don't do, you're now here illegally because your visa's expired. And so if you don't do what I tell you to do, I'm going to get you in trouble. You're going to be the one that's going to be in trouble about this, not me. So there again, a lot of them will go along with their trafficker and do whatever they're told because they're afraid of what might happen to them if they don't. And then also facilitating or controlling a human trafficking victim's access to a controlled substance. And this is another big one too, because a lot of traffickers will either give their victims drugs to lower their inhibitions to make them do things they wouldn't normally do if they were sober, or they get them hooked on drugs. So there again, now it's that endless cycle. If they want more drugs, they have to do what the trafficker says so they can go and get more drugs. We actually had a 17-year-old girl. She was bought offline from Louisville, Kentucky, and she was brought over here to Knox County to the Vincennes area. She met a man, had sex with him for money. Well, this was a couple years ago, right when we had a really bad flu outbreak, and she was really, really sick. So her trafficker left her here, and he went back to Louisville because she was so sick. He actually thought she was going to die. That's how sick she was. She called 911 from the hotel herself because she was feeling that bad. And so she was very acceptable at the hospital and talking to everyone. It was really good about talking to law enforcement, also talking to her advocate. But she said she was very first trafficked when she was 14 years old. She unfortunately witnessed her mother being killed by a boyfriend in a domestic violence incident. Her dad was in prison. Her mom was an only child, so she had no other aunts or uncles or anyone to take her. So they put her into a group home. She said, this isn't for me. I'm not staying here. So at 14 years old, she ran away from that group home, went to a gas station and was hanging out, talking to some kids she knew from school. And this lady had overheard the conversation and put two and two together and realized that she had ran away from the group home. So she said, hey, I'm on my way to a party. Why don't you go with me? So she goes to the party, she hangs out. She's like, there was drinking, there was some marijuana smoking there. She goes, but someone handed me a hit of crack cocaine. She said, I smoked it. She goes, I was instantly in love. That was my drug of choice. So she went to the lady that brought her to the party. She says, how do I get more of that? And that's when at 14, she took her to a man to have sex with him for money, and then took her to the drug dealer to go buy more drugs. So that was then that endless cycle of how she kind of got caught in that cycle of human trafficking. So now it's part of Indiana law that if they do something like that, it's a higher element to how they can prove trafficking is really going on.
Christina, the question has come up, has there been any thought in Indiana to legalizing prostitution since so many are human traffic victims?
I don't believe so. There are kind of a really good question with that. So there are some people that we do consider to be sex workers. They do willingly work in the field of prostitution and pornography, and also with the local strip clubs. And they choose to do that work. And we don't want to take anything away from them because that is their choice. I do think some of them may have had backgrounds of prior human trafficking, but I don't think legalizing prostitution would make human trafficking any less or any better. I still think we would have a lot of issues with people still being forced to do it against their will, even though it was legalized. So,
okay. Thank you.
Good question. I like questions though. So we think about industries very vulnerable to trafficking. We kind of talked a lot about domestic work and a little bit about restaurants. Of course, there again, that sex industry. Like I said, really keep in mind pornography is a very high human trafficking industry because a lot of people are not doing it willingly. Then the local, like I said, being forced to go to a local strip club. And a lot of times you might have intimate partner violence where you have a partner that tells their victim, if you really truly love me, you'll go down and have sex with someone for money so you can help us with rent or help make the car payment. But there again, they just use things over their head. Then you have your health and beauty and even massage parlors. Massage parlors are actually the #1 venue for human trafficking. And if you noticed in the video, they show it really kind of fast, the very first one I showed you. There is a massage parlor there where the curtains are drawn and it just has stickers on the windows. So those are the ones we tend to kind of question what might be going on in those places because they want to kind of keep it private, who's coming and going from those facilities. So that's why a lot of times when you drive past them, the curtains are always drawn, lights are always really dim and turned down. They might have a front door or a back door entrance. They pop up in the middle of the night before you guys realize it. All of a sudden they're there. And then sometimes they also leave very fastly. But those are the ones, like I said, that we kind of question their what is all going on within those facilities. Usually most of the massage parlors that are pretty legitimate, they will be a nice open storefront. So when you drive by, you can kind of see what the activity is and what's going on there. So just keep in mind those ones that just seems to feel a little more quiet and closed off. And then we put social services on here. And sometimes people are like, what do you mean social services? Why is this on here? Because social services are supposed to be helping people, right? And most social workers are pretty legitimate. And we do this work because we love to help people and we want to be there to help people. But unfortunately, we see an increased rise where people get involved with social services because they know they have access to vulnerable people, especially vulnerable youth. So we have seen an increased rise to some issues of foster care families that have human trafficking that happen and go on there. So just a lot of different things that can happen in those areas. So there's a lot of screening and different things that are really good for that. And then there's hospitality. So a lot of things happen in your hotels and your motels with human trafficking that they do see and go on. Then construction, forestry, and agriculture. Those are what we kind of consider to be more of like seasonal type jobs that tend to have a little bit more of a migrant population that works those areas. Especially in Indiana, what are we surrounded by? Farms, right? So we do tend to have and we are a rural state. So there is a high migrant farm population that do work in agriculture. here in Southern Indiana, I always use the example because if you drive along the highways and stuff here, you literally drive through farms and drive through a lot of farm areas where we have a lot of corn, melon farms, and also soybean farms here. And so there's some different things that we see and happen that go on in those areas. And it's not just labor trafficking, it could be sex trafficking as well. Because a lot of them will send their money back home to their families to help take care of their family. And that's, of course, why they're here working. And then so they don't keep very much money to live on when they're here. So they may turn to what we call survival sex. So they can then earn money for a place to stay or something to eat or drink. So there is labor trafficking and sex trafficking. And then there's door-to-door sales. How many of you have ever had someone come to your house and try to sell you a magazine? Okay, a couple head nods with that. And I used to never think about it, but so someone used to come to my house, and I live on a dead-end street, so it hasn't happened in several years, but they'd always come to my house probably about the middle of summer. They'd knock on my door, they'd tell me they're earning money for college, and they would hand me this laminated sheet of magazines. And they would always say, I need you to buy 3 magazines from me. And I never quite understood why they always said 3 magazines. But usually that means they've been established a quota. And that's why they were trying to be pushy about trying to get that quota established. Then I'm a talker, so I ask them questions and different things. And he's like, well, we've been traveling everywhere. You know, last week we were in Missouri, or it might have been Ohio. I'm really not sure. So that's a huge red flag as well. If they ever question their whereabouts, that means they get moved around frequently. So between, you know, like I said, the established quota and the whereabouts, those are some things to definitely look out for. And I always suggest to people, you know, if you feel that person's in imminent danger, call 911 to get them help and services. But if they're not in imminent danger, if you call 911, you might put them in more danger. So just kind of ask them if they are safe or different things. If you feel like they're under the age of 18, of course, we do have to contact DCS. We are all mandatory reporters. But if they're over 18 and you just have questions, you suspect it's something that's not legitimate, you can also always call a tip hotline or call the Human Trafficking National Hotline as well, is another option. And I get asked this question all the time. Does human trafficking really happen in Indiana? Is it that big of an issue or that much of a problem? So what they do is when someone does call the National Human Trafficking Hotline, they take the map of the United States of America and they infrared the map in red where most of the calls are coming from. So in 2018, here's the map of the United States of America. Can we tell where Indiana is? Sort of, right? But it's really hard to kind of see it and make it out because it is pretty covered up. Do you know why Indiana would be so prevalent with human trafficking?
Sporting events?
Sporting events is a good one.
Is it because of the interstate?
Okay, what is our state motto?
The Hoosier State.
Crossroads of America.
Crossroads of America.
We're the crossroads of America. So of course the highways and byways that go through Indiana alone can be a huge factor, along with just like Rebecca said, with those different sporting events or just any event that draws people to that community can be a type of event that can be a big factor in moving victims around for human trafficking. I know with COVID, it's been a lot of issues last year with everything, but any event you have, you know, you think about the Indianapolis area, you have the Lucas Center for football, you have the different convention centers downtown, we have the Pacers, the Colts. Some of our communities as well have different like entertainment centers where you draw concerts in. In almost every community, you have a 4-H fair. And you probably know people that come back to your community just for some, you know, those events going on in your community. So if you know people are coming to those, it's probably bringing traffickers in as well. And then I've also highlighted a couple other different things we've kind of talked about. Like we did talk about Indiana being such a rural state. So we do have some issues with migrant farm workers. We also do see a generational cycle of violence. So usually you have, and it can be male or female, but typically it's like a dad or a stepdad who is prostituting out mom. And then when daughter becomes of a certain age, they start prostituting her as well. And then unfortunately, because they live in that home, in that environment, that's all they know. So they don't question it a lot or don't think it's out of the norm because that's what they live and what they've learned. And then we do see sometimes also you might have an older boyfriend, older girlfriend, younger boyfriend or girlfriend who then, again, they kind of force into that lifestyle as well. Like going out and have sex for money or whatever to help, we really have to have you do this. You have to help pay rent, have to help make that car payment. Our bills are due. If you really love me, you're going to do this. So we see that happen. And then we do have some issues as well of teen runaways. Maybe they're living in a home where it's not a good environment. Mom or dad might be using drugs or drinking alcohol, issues and stuff going on there. And so they choose to run away because someone has friended them or they don't want to be in that environment no more. And they're looking for a better circumstance or a better life. And so they run away because of that. They may meet somebody online or over the internet, especially with everything being so virtual right now. And we'll talk about that a little bit more. So then again, they might run away to go meet a person. Then that person, of course, puts them into human trafficking because they promise them so many different things. But of course, that's just a lot that has to do with it. So those are the main. Oh, and then we also see a big issue, unfortunately, because of drug epidemics, we also see issues where parents will sell their kids for drugs. Whether it's to get more drugs or to get money to buy more drugs, they will allow someone to perform sex acts on their child. And I would love to tell you this is a rather new concept, but unfortunately it's not. My job prior to doing this job, I actually worked with sexual assault victims. And several years ago, I remember having a woman who was about 45 came in and she told me when she was 6, 7, and 8 years old, her mother would sell her for drugs. So you got to imagine that happened over 40 years ago. So this, like I said, is not a new concept. It's just something that's become more prevalent. So we don't keep a lot of statistics because there's not a lot of mandates on human trafficking, but we are getting better about keeping better records and different things. But here's just a simple snapshot of, we became an agency back in October 2015. So since that time, there's been a steady increase to the number of calls being made on the hotline and also the number of cases being reported. And this is just Indiana alone numbers. And then our service partner providers have worked with well over 1,000 youth, ages 24 and younger, who have been victimized in the state of Indiana alone since October 2015. So those are some of the just information we'd like to share. I guess it's probably because people now know who they can call and contact to get help and services. So I'm going to show you Aubrey Lloyd's video. Aubrey is a very amazing, remarkable woman. She was trafficked when she was 16 years old in Colorado Springs. And then she eventually moved to Indiana and she said, I want to do some things to help out with human trafficking and get the programs and stuff started and emphasis about how we can help people with human trafficking. She did not know she was a victim of human trafficking until she was an adult and was taking a college course and they covered the topic and she's like, wow, that's what happened to me. So again, a lot of youth do not identify as a victim of human trafficking until they are older and they get that education on it. She does not like to be called a victim. She is definitely a survivor advocate, and she now works for the Office of Victims of Crime and goes around the country educating people on human trafficking. So this is just a snippet of her story because we want to break down the elements of grooming. So it is only going to show you a little clip, and then we'll just kind of pick up from there.
Active in high school. I was involved in the band, I was involved in sports, I was very active with my friends. So on the outside looking in, even if I had some things going on at home and I had some past abuses, I looked like a pretty well-adjusted teenage kid that was doing pretty well in school. And then this one night, this group of kids came in just like any other night. It was a convenience store. And this one particular girl stopped and said, I love the way you do your hair. And as a 16-year-old girl, I was like, oh, wow, thanks. And she had appeared older. And so that's always kind of fun. And so she ended up coming in a couple of nights after that. And we just, again, we're talking. And eventually, she's like, you should meet me at the mall. We should, just hang out one day. And so I did.
So do you notice any types of grooming that might have happened there, or something that just kind of was working up to it?
Flattery.
Okay, flattery, right? Right away they said, well, I love the way you do your hair, right?
And that's
That
important
and
to a teenager.
yeah, and using another female to make her probably feel safer as well.
A couple weeks ago, I was doing a presentation, and it kind of, someone said something like, what's so odd about these situations, it was kind of so normal, and it didn't feel like, when we think about human trafficking, I think a lot of people really think like it has to be violent or something that happens really fast and abrupt. But this was kind of normal, right? And like you said, she was kind of another girl. She did say she did appear to be a little older, but it wasn't something so out of the norm, kind of. Anything else?
It was repetitive. She kept coming in. She established the contact, and then she kept the contact going and the relationship building.
But it was also kind of quick too, because she came in only a couple times. But like you said, she did kind of keep coming in. But that quick involvement is like a really big red flag to a healthy relationship. Anything else?
She also was non-threatening in any way.
Oh yeah, most definitely.
She appeared very approachable.
Yep.
She was with a group though. Didn't say she was by herself. She said there was a group of people and she was kind of with them.
Okay. Yeah. And she says this really fast too, but she says, despite my past abuse, so we also know Aubrey was a previous survivor. I was a pretty well-adjusted kid, and she did participate in sports and activities at school. She was involved in band. But right away, the biggest thing is they did that flattery. Oh, I love the way you do your hair. And then you kind of alluded to it when you said, what teenage kid doesn't want to feel special? And this is what traffickers know when they understand about their victims, especially when they start trying to look for their vulnerabilities. And so even if you think about when you were a 16-year-old kid, did you ever want to feel special or feel like you belonged or kind of feel safe somewhere? Or maybe you just didn't know a trusted adult you could go and talk to for help. And so traffickers, when they start putting themselves in the connection with a potential victim, they start trying to find these things out. And so even that flattery, how she reacts and responds, can tell that trafficker a lot of different things about how that person is typically going to react and respond and be about stuff. And then how much information they give to whether or not they could potentially be a victim of human trafficking. And they kind of go look for it. Go ahead.
I was going to say there's a comment in chat, making her feel special and inviting. And especially for teenagers, you do really want to feel like you're included and you're a part of a group. And I can just see where so many can be drawn in by that.
Oh, absolutely.
A good point.
Oh, yeah. That's a very good point. I appreciate that. But yeah, just anything to draw them in because, right, they hate their parents. They hate the world. They don't understand who they are. Hormones are changing. And then they just, so many pressures too on adolescents nowadays, getting schoolwork done and sports and activities and doing this and doing that. And then you have to decide what college you're going to and what your career is going to be. It's a stressful time. A lot of changes going on. So, all right, here's another little clip about Aubrey.
I met her down at the mall and, she ended up taking me shopping and she was just like, oh, that's a really cute shirt. You look really good in that color. And I was like, oh, that's kind of expensive. I was a Goodwill kid. I wanted to get the most bang for my buck. To go to a mall to buy something was just kind of outside of my realm of reality. And she's like, no, I got it. Don't even worry about it, girl. And I was like, oh, this is kind of cool. And then later we ended up going and getting, pedicures. And I had never had a pedicure done before. And I was like, this is really cool. And she's so much fun. And that was just kind of the start of our friendship. And, looking back, I was absolutely being isolated from any other support system. They became my entire world. And again, I think sometimes we have this misperception because of different things in the media that this this happens really quickly. This was almost a 6-month investment into my life. And so, no one questioned it for 6 months.
So a lot happens there. What are some of the things that kind of points out to us?
Making her feel at a new level. She can get new clothes and be at a, have a whole new lease on life with having more money.
Oh yeah, they start that enticing, right? Buying her things and stuff like that. And they were fun.
Yeah, she honed in on exactly the kinds of things that she would be most interested in.
Oh yeah. Anything else?
They began isolating her. That's especially in my experience is key in this. They remove them from any support structure that they may have in place, and then groom them that we are the only support structure that you need. It's that isolation away from, or movement again, away from support systems, family systems, and familiarity.
Yep.
I think also a sense of it made the support system seem a little obsolete, and that world was better.
Oh yeah. Promise of a better life, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And they absolutely do that. They do isolate them. So right away she kind of says, I was, a goodwill kid. So there are poverty issues there they have found out about. Then they start buying her things and that enticement. And then she even says they were so much fun. She'd never done some of those things and stuff before. And then the isolation. So she'd quit participating in a band and sports. Now, Aubrey did go to school every single day, but they started controlling her daily life, what she could and couldn't do. She quit hanging out with other friends. She wasn't home very much more. She only hung out with at their house, which is what can be kind of tricky sometimes because we all work with youth or have youth around us. And so whenever they meet that new friend, they do tend to spend a lot of time with that person only, right? To where they may not come over to our house or different things quite as much. But the biggest key element to remember is in a healthy relationship, there's give and take. Like you spend time there, you spend time here. So if you see it's kind of like too much of a one-sided situation, that's when it maybe you should question if it's legitimate or if it's a good idea or not. And then one of the big thing too that she mentioned in this one is that it took 6 months worth of time and no one questioned it. So trafficking and their grooming, it does not happen overnight. And that's something we got to remember. There's a lot of different things people do talk about, and sometimes it's better. People will put in their mind that this has to be a stranger motivated type thing. But like I said, 6 months worth of time to groom her and get to know her, know things about her, what made her vulnerable. They don't just kidnap someone and force them to sex slavery the next day. So when we talk about vulnerable populations, the number one most vulnerable population is runaway or homeless youth. Usually within the first 48 hours of someone running away from home, a trafficker will come in contact with their victim. Unfortunately, they know where to go and to find them. They know where they hang out and stuff like that. And then because your youth might be running away from a bad home life situation, unfortunately, not all parents will report their runaway youth to the police. So you have about 1/3 of all runaway homeless youth that are never reported, and no one's even looking for that youth out there. So keep that in mind as well. Then there can be poverty issues. System involvement. And when we talk about system involved, we usually refer to that if that youth has any type of a case manager. So they might have DCS involvement, they might have delinquency involvement, runaway, foster care, those are all system involved. Then you have abuse, neglect, or substance abuse. And this can be anybody in the home, not just the victim themselves. If they have a parent that's being abusive, or being abused or substance abuse issues, that can affect, of course, everyone around them as well. Untreated mental health issues. We have a lot of really good facilities, but if someone's not being treated for their mental illness, there again, that can be a big target for them. LGBTQIA plus youth is a very high group of youth that are being targeted as well for their sexuality. Just because there again, they may not be being accepted by their family when they come out. And so there again, if they are not being accepted, you might have a trafficker that comes along and says, you know what, you can be whoever you are, just come live with me, I'll take care of you. And that is what a youth is looking for, is that acceptance and that safety, especially for something as serious as their sexual orientation. So that is a big issue that we are dealing with right now. And then if you think about your immigrant and migrant youth, along with your refugee and asylum seeking, I always kind of tend to say that they're again looking for acceptance and understanding and safety. And so traffickers will manipulate those different things with youth to make them feel like they are being understood and safe, when really they're not. We're being manipulated in different situations. All right, here's a little more video from Aubrey.
And then I was doing French homework, and my mom came home and she was making fun of the way I was pronouncing some of my words, and I got entirely frustrated. And I called my friend and I was crying, and I was like, I just can't deal with this. Like, I'm trying to do my homework and my mom is making fun of me and she's drunk and I don't know what to do. And she's like, just pack up some stuff and just come over here. Just come stay with us. I'll make sure you get to school. You know, you can have your sister come over and hang out. Like, just don't worry about it no more. And in my 16-year-old brain, I was like, thank you. Thank you for giving me an opportunity to get out of the mess that I thought I was living in. And so I said yes. And I packed up my stuff and I snuck out and I ran away for the first time. And so I got to her house, we sat down and had dinner like we had done a dozen times before. And then I was asked a question that changed my entire life. I was asked, would I want to join their escort service? And all of a sudden, I'm like, I don't understand what's happening. I don't understand what's going on. They're talking about that they actually run an escort service, and the stepfather was actually the ringleader of this escort service, and the mom and the daughter both worked for them. And, you know, they wanted to give me a really great opportunity to join and make some money. And so as I'm trying to kind of figure out what this all means, they can obviously see panic on my face. And my friend is trying to tell me how great this is, and girl, it has nothing to do with sex. Sex isn't even involved in this. You just get to go on dates and make lots of money. And then, you know, her stepfather round in, you want to save up money for college, right? Well, yeah, of course I do. This is a great way to do that. You can make money really quickly. And they were, again, it was such a normalized conversation, literally as we're eating dinner at the kitchen table. And I remember at one point looking out their kitchen window and thinking, I'm in a completely different world and I have no idea what I'm supposed to be doing. And so I very simply said, I really don't want to be part of this. And they kind of looked at each other and they're like, that's fine. We're here for you. We're, you know, whatever you need, let us know. But if you change your mind, let me know. And then I continued eating my spaghetti and going on with dinner, thinking that was going to be the end of that conversation.
So unfortunately, that's not the end of her conversation. And we'll kind of get to that. But so a lot of things happen in this one, right? So now we find out mom is an alcoholic and there's lots of issues between her and Aubrey, and they fight quite a bit. So the traffickers kind of knew this. And so she even says, I ran away for the first time. So she did run away multiple times, and she would go back to that family because in her mind, they were a family to her because they spent 6 months worth of time grooming Aubrey, getting to know her, and they created a family around her that she didn't have at home. And so that was her biggest thing they did. That was the biggest thing. They made her feel safe and belonging there more than she did at home herself. And so she even said, we sat down, we had dinner like we had so many times before. That's something her mom didn't do. So unfortunately, what happens later that night is Aubrey goes to a party with her friend. She says, I didn't drink. She goes, there was drinking going on. Someone handed me a Coke. And then I completely, totally blacked out. So they did drug her. She says, I woke up to being sexually assaulted. And when the rape was over, she said, Dante, her friend's dad, came into the room, threw her clothes, and told her, that's the last time you ever tell me no. Because unfortunately, they kind of knew once they opened that door, do you want to be an escort? And she knew too much. There was no going back. Like they had to kind of push forward with it and keep going. And so that's some of the biggest things that we do see with those elements is that they do kind of force them at that point and don't let them go back. So the entire time what they did with Aubrey is they actually made an intentional effort to identify her as a potential victim and to gain her trust. So from the very first beginning of them telling her, I love the way you do your hair, was to see if she could be a potential victim for human trafficking. And then they did other different things as far as like gift giving and favors. There was a power imbalance right away. And like she even said, oh, they appeared to be older, which was kind of fun. So there was an age balance over there. They sometimes tend to make it really secretive. They might break the rules for special occasions, create occasions to be alone with that child, of course. And then, like I said, that promise of better life. That is the biggest thing that they're going to give them, is that there's something bigger and better than, of course, what they're experiencing. And with Aubrey, of course, that was highly important because she didn't have that family that she so wanted and that loving, because her mom was an alcoholic, dad wasn't active, involved. And so there again, this was a family that she could go to and have. Some things that are important too, social media is another form of grooming. It can be really good to have social media as a way to connect with people and different things and stuff with other people who don't get to see. I, of course, get so busy as an adult. It's nice to have for social media that I can see what's still going on with my friends and not have to be with them all the time. But like I said, traffickers will use it as a way to target, recruit, and groom their victims. And it's really simple. And there again, it's not threatening in any kind of way or something we would think that it is. So over here, you guys can probably see it pretty good on the computer. But it's just a simple 5 back and forth interactions with a victim and their potential trafficker. So Rain Smith, thanks for adding me. You're very pretty. You're interested in a job making easy money. Jane responds, depends on what it is. Thanks, you too. Same to you, pretty lady. Rain, you can work with girls that dance nude, do parties, some do one-on-one. Some girls make $200 more an hour. Does any of that sound interest to you? Is it all nude dancing? How do I know it's safe? And would it be private or in like a bar? It's safe. It's all private. You can make lots of money depending on what you're willing to do and not willing to do. It works if you work it. Send me your number and I can have my girl. So that's even where they kind of make it calm. My girl will call you. She's been doing it for a while and you can talk. She gives her number and says, are you just trying to find girls that are interested in help? Because I can probably find some girls for you as well. So how many of us know someone, especially a youth, who would probably respond and react this way because they probably don't think it's that big of a deal? I mean, probably, right? Because youth tend to think nothing bad's going to happen to me. This isn't that big of a deal. Well, I'm going to earn money. It can't be that bad if other people are doing it. If I get some of my friends involved, then there again, we're doing the buddy system, so we can't all be hurt. So those can be some different things that go along with it. And social media, it can be very dangerous. I've had a couple different instances with Instagram where people, of course, befriend someone and then they start talking and communicating and develop a relationship. And then it turns into asking for money or asking for other things. And granted, it wasn't human trafficking, but it could definitely lead to that later down the road. And so we see that happen. But yeah, the biggest thing that scares me right now is the virtual world our youth are living in, with even school being virtual and different things. There's a lot more targeting and grooming and stuff that's going on right now. So what connection might traffickers have with their victims? So we look at kind of this pie chart, and a lot of you are in like helping roles and officials and different things. So you probably will not be surprised that 36% is immediate family. Then your boyfriends and girlfriends are partners, friends of family, employers, and 9% strangers. The biggest takeaway from this pie chart is 91% of the time it's someone known to the victim. Only 9% of the time is it strangers. Even though people tend to think trafficking involves someone kidnapping their victims, that is not the case example. Be more leery of someone new in the family or a new marriage, maybe aunt or uncle, that is just you don't feel good about or you're not sure about. Those are who's more going to be traffickers. We see a lot of things on social media, and the biggest thing that aggravates me is the desensitizing of human trafficking, where someone always says, well, you know, be aware, watch your friends and your neighbors and your women and their children walking alone in the parking lots, you know, because they think they're going to be kidnapped. That is not. Yes, that can happen, but that is not the most prevalence of human trafficking. Most of the time it's someone that's known to the victim, someone that's going to friend the victim. You know, Aubrey's situation, 6 months worth of time of grooming her. Granted, they were strangers in the beginning, but they became a lot more to her than her own family was. And so those are ideals and different things and stuff that we have to look out for. All right, so why didn't Aubrey just leave?
So at this point of kind of my story, a lot of people ask me, why didn't you just leave? There was something inside of you that obviously was triggering that this was a bad situation. And why didn't you just go? And that's a great question that I want to kind of try to give an answer to. One, I was 16. So I didn't even have the ability to make really good rational decisions. I felt like this was my choice because I had made a choice to have a friend that led me to this decision. I had chose to run away. I had chose to not leave immediately that night. And I think because of my past abuse, I just felt like this was my life. These were the cards that I was dealt, and I didn't have any other options, and I had to just suck it up and live with it. Plus, all the people that were around this issue and these experiences, I didn't know who I could trust. Could I really trust police because there were police around this issue? Could I really trust an adult because there were obviously adults that were buying us? I didn't know if there was anyone that I could turn to that wasn't involved in this, so I didn't feel like I could trust anybody. And then there was lots of violence that we witnessed and experienced. And it was very inconsistent violence. You know, sometimes I would do something wrong and then one of the other girls would get beat for it. Maybe they would do something right and I was like, oh, good for you. And then I would get beat for it. And so there was this level of violence that we never quite understood what was going on. There was always lots of threats. There was weapons around. These guys were obviously pretty dangerous. I remember one girl had said something to Dante and they took her out on the street and they just were jumping on her and kicking her, and then she disappeared. I don't know what happened to her. Maybe they took her to the emergency room. Maybe she ended up dead. I don't know. But that was enough in my 16-year-old brain to realize I had no other option than to just go ahead and keep doing what I was doing.
So unfortunately, I think in this clip, the bad thing about it is right away, the first thing she does is she blames herself. I chose to run away. I chose them to be my friends. And a lot of victims do blame themselves for what happened. Aubrey was young, so her age was a factor. Her past abuse was a big factor in it too, to where she felt like she couldn't just leave that situation and stuff like that. And then she talks about that climate of fear. There again, like they were walking on eggshells. They don't know what was right or what was wrong, because she even said we would get beat for this and then we wouldn't get beat for it the next day. And then, of course, the treatment of that woman, not knowing if she was alive or dead. I mean, that's a lot of, in a 16-year-old mind, to kind of make sense of that, let alone be fearful that's going to happen to you or not. So those could be some stuff too. And then even that trust is a really big factor as well that victims have. And this is where, as a helping official, when we go in there and just let them know, like, I'm here, you can trust me, victims right away think no, because they trust their trafficker, and look what happened to them in that situation. So that can also be a really big issue to definitely to think about when it comes to working with a human trafficking victim. Do we want to take a break? Do you want to take like a 5-minute break real quick?
Yes, I think that'd be good.
Okay. Well, let's take a 5-minute break, and then I'll come back and try to get it all done.
Okay. So Allie, if you want to stop recording now, and then we'll pick up here in just a little bit. And everyone will be receiving recording links to all of the sessions today that you will be able to share with others in your organization. So we will come back then and at 9:55 and resume. So lots to think about.